prevent Australia from running out of energy. I'm Paul Raftery, and I work for Projects RH. We are investment specialists connecting the world. We connect projects with money. Today, I'm joined by Bryce Jones, Managing Director of Projectus based in Brisbane, Australia. Projectus is a strategic ally of Projects RH, and Bryce and I are old friends. By way of background, Australia is reasonably politically stable. We have had a Liberal National Party coalition in power since 2013. Then Prime Minister Tony Abbott's view on energy policy was clear, but cost him his job. He lost it to fellow Liberal Malcolm Turnbull in 2015. Later, Turnbull lost his job to Scott Morrison in August 2018. Abbott had a very clear vision of Australia remaining a low-cost energy country using the vast and high-quality coal that it has. Turnbull took the opposite view, wanting us to transform Australia into a new low-carbon, high-tech economy. Scott Morrison emerged almost like a character out of Yes, Prime Minister, the BBC comedy series, as a middle candidate. And he could heal the party and the people after the philosophical wars between Abbott and Turnbull. The problem is no real policy decision has been made since August 2018. Morrison received an unexpected but healthy majority at the May 2019 elections. Yes, he and Minister Angus Taylor have held lots of consultations with industry, but no real decisions have been made. The market is looking for guidance, and without huge levels of investment over the next several years, nothing will happen. Bryce, can you explain how and what is stability in the power system?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, stability is the critical issue for the introduction of renewables into the energy market in Australia. But before I continue too much further, I need to say that I'm not an industry expert here, and this is not an expert opinion by any means, but certainly for a point of discussion, yes, the stability is something that's being dealt with quite substantially by the AEMO. Stability is, or lack thereof, is generally arising because of the volume or the quantity of renewables entering the market, particularly in Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria, where something in the order of 30% is being provided by renewable sources. So, with that significant proportion of power that is intermittent and peaks during the day and the like, then it is causing real issues for AEMO and the system in general to remain stable. Baseload generation is inherently stable because of the things like rotating equipment, very large equipment, and other technical factors and continuity of its operation, of course. So those are not readily available by nature with the renewables, and so that's causing stability issues. AEMO is dealing with it. The industry is coming to grips with it through some significant learnings, such as South Australia a couple of years ago. And what they're doing is to install or require the renewable generators to install equipment that emulates a baseload generator. So that equipment is significantly expensive, but that's also being offset by dramatic reductions in the cost per megawatt hour being provided by solar. So it's a dynamic situation. in relation to getting stability. But the other thing too is that a lot of the new solar producers, and quite large scale, particularly in Queensland and other states as well, are right out on the edge of the transmission grid because land is cheaper and there's lots of sunlight, etc. So being on the edge of the grid and then injecting the energy in at the edge is also a real issue, which is coming to bear. So that also plays into the question of system stability. Paul?
Thanks, Bryce. As you're aware, Projects RH is advisor to the Lockrose Solar Energy Project in Queensland. We've already had substantial discussions with the Australian Energy Market Operator, AMO, and what they've insisted for us is we put in quite a substantial entry. That is, allows them to manage our entry and exit from the system. But more importantly, I think they want us to store energy at night so that we're available in the mornings. And we will have a new urban area next to our power group where they want us, the power, to go. So I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that the market's not aware of. I'd like to set a bit of a scene of where we are, because Australia as a country wants from its leaders long-term energy stability, which is politically acceptable, economically viable, and environmentally sustainable. We're looking for an energy strategy. In the case of Australia, we have a small population, huge distances, and most of the population lives in about 10% of the country spread down the east coast of the continent. The national grid supports that 90% of the population. Projects RH is actively involved in renewable energy in Australia and elsewhere and supports diversified generation. The system needs to be able to support and withstand weather extremes, technical issues, and breakdowns. Effectively, the system needs to be robust and available. Australians want a system that's there 99.99% of the time, and they're prepared to pay for it. So, Bryce, what is sustainable baseload, and what is the role of solar and wind in supplementing what we have and growing?
Well, I guess it's the government and the public and the world essentially is demanding the ever-increasing proportion of power to be provided by renewables, and clearly there's the 50% target by government and others, and of course there are a lot of others that are calling for 100%, and so this is going to remain a big issue for quite some time. It's a political issue as well. But it's inevitable that higher proportions of the generation capacity needs to be done by renewables. I think it's clear that coal will eventually transition out, but it's not going to be that quick, and it's probably going to be a lot longer than people would like. A lot of people would like, but that's the reality of it. And but like I said before, there's tension between stable power and non-stable power that's going to dictate what happens in the medium term, Paul.
Yeah. One of the things that I often get asked about is why Australia doesn't have more hydro or tidal power. And quite frankly, tidal power, the technology hasn't been proven, and the topography of Australia doesn't lend itself to hydro. So we do talk about the Snowy Mountain scheme, but at the moment it's really the national battery rather than a scheme we can rely on for steady provision of energy. So I think we need to start with, where is the legacy? Where are we at? What do we have, Bryce? What is the issue with the transmission system, or we have a lot of old plant. So what is the next step?
Well, look, the government is moving towards trying to achieve battery storage via snowy hydro. And whilst it's in principle a good project, there are peripheral issues. And you alluded to Australia not being well set up for these things, but also snowy hydro is a long way from the major energy consumption areas of Sydney and Melbourne. So it's fine to potentially work as a storage, but transmitting the energy from that into the grid to Sydney and Melbourne is going to require expensive solutions to make that stable. Paul?
Right, would stability be assisted by putting renewable power diversely across the system? I mean, Lockrose is on the back of the Gold Coast, and the new Northern Tableland project has been announced by UBPC, which is 720 megawatts, is up in the Northern Tablelands, which can connect to the pipe from Millmerran. Is that the type of places we should be putting the power, the new solar and wind power?
Sorry, Paul, could you just repeat that question a bit louder? You're just a little bit soft for me.
Okay. What I was saying is Lockrose is at the back of the Gold Coast and close to population. The new Northern Tablelands project is close to the Millmerran pipeline, which will take the power to Sydney. Are they the places we should be putting the new solar and wind generation, not places like Port Lincoln in South Australia?
Oh, look, I think it's pretty obvious to me that the closer to the grids that these projects like Lockrose can be is beneficial as compared to out on the edge of the grid. So that project, I would think on the face of it, would be well positioned geographically.
What we found with our work, Bryce, was that we fell into a preferred area. So we're in the Darling Downs red zone. So it's an optimal zone. So work has been done by the Australian market operator to say where they want the power. So I think we need to all be conscious of that. At Projects RH, we don't see that the issue is too much renewable power. What we see, the issue is needs to be in the right place. In the long term, we need a stable energy policy, which is broadly supported not only by the government, but by the opposition too. Of course, over the life cycle of a mainstream generation plant, whether it be solar or coal, we're talking 25 to 30 years. So you need a long-term investment policy, which is supported by the two major political parties. So, Bryce, what is the result of not having a national energy policy?
Well, I think we're seeing the effects of not having a national energy policy already, Paul. And I guess that the longer that continues, the more we're going to get the same. And I think the things that you say are very relevant about having a coordinated policy that integrates others, all the fragmented federated system that we've got here. Each state aiming to do their own, setting their own standards, setting their own objectives and the like. I think it's time that a coordinated national approach to bring those together in a integrated way, particularly when power is being transported across state borders. It's more and more relevant that it falls back to the federal government.
Yeah, I agree. Look, what really concerns me is we haven't built any real baseload power since the 2000s. So the last private sector project was Millmerran, which was built by Shell and Intergen, and it was 840 megawatts, and it was built in 2002. The government of Queensland built Kogan Creek, which is 750 megawatts, in 2007. And the third youngest power station in Australia is also in Queensland. It's Callard C, so in the deep north of Queensland, and is 840 megawatts. And it was built in joint venture between Shell and the Queensland government. That says to me that over 2,000 of the youngest power generation units are actually in central and north Queensland. And the interesting thing is that the Commonwealth government has talked about building a 1 gigawatt coal-fired power station in central Queensland. So you're right, that power is all going to have to be transferred south. And we need more transmission lines if that's to occur. What we're seeing is effectively Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia and Queensland and New South Wales are relying on the Snowy Mountains hydro to stabilise the system, the so-called national battery. But we need more than that. I mean, Australia needs to start on its national policy. We need to have distributed power and we need suitable transmission lines with redundancy. Things do break down. So we need a national network which benefits from solar and wind, but also, when needed, has access to gas-fired peaking. We need to see our significant interest in investing in renewables, but also in baseload. Currently, Projects RH is working with a Swiss group, and as recent as yesterday, we were approached by a major Beijing-based engineering company looking to expand its footprint in solar across Australia. It would do that on a finance basis, so they're happy to invest as well. I think Australia has both short-term and long-term needs, and we need to build that new distributed power system. We need to have a real national debate, because one of the cheap ways of providing power is actually have nuclear, and Canada's had that since the 1950s. But it's almost like it's too hard to speak about. And if we're going to have more coal-fired power, it really needs to have gas sequestration, because we will have to be a responsible global citizen. But either of those options is 8 to 10 years away. Someone's got to make some pretty firm decisions, and the investment then runs for 30 years. So you're looking at a 40-year time horizon. So what I see is we have some immediate problems we need to deal with, and they mostly will be solved by renewables. And we have some long-term baseload issues we need to deal with. I think part of the horizon is there. We need political guidance and administrative guidance. We were trying to find some of the material for Lockrose. It took one of our engineers a week to find where it was on the Australian Market Regulatory Authority's website. And quite frankly, he'd worked there. So we thought he'd know where it was. So we need to get this all out in the public domain and have a real discussion. Bryce, what do you think we need to do in the long term?
Well, I think, as you were saying, Paul, establishing a policy for the long term is the first step for this. Look, I think there's a lot of market forces that will deal with what demands and opportunities for investment and otherwise are available and will become available in due course. But I think the long term it's just critical to get it right. So I think a serious policy and a coordinated approach and integration of all the key stakeholders in this, to me, is the long term. And I think it's we all know that it's been issues politically for both of the major parties in Australia. So I think, as you said before, it's pretty essential that in the or for the long term to be effective and produce the results that we need as a country. That we need a very robust and generally accepted policy framework for all this, and within which all the major players can safely invest in projects and not be suffering a risk of a failure of a major investment. So that to me is the sense of fundamentals for the long term, as I see it, Paul. But as I've said before, I'm not an industry expert by these sorts of standards, and I can only make those observations from the side.
But I think that's important, right? Because I think it's the community that's going to set the tone to government. I think projects like RockPro's got so much support from state and local government because that's what the community wants. They want solar. But they need to have things like battery storage. But more importantly, we need to address baseload because we still need 24/7 power. When the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow, we need power from somewhere. I agree with you. It needs to be a national government. It needs to get beyond parties. So what we need is a middle ground. We need some more solar or wind. We also need a long-term direction for baseload that's reasonably priced, sustainable, and stable. So, Bryce, thank you very much for accepting our invitation today. If the audience has any questions, we're quite happy to receive them and respond to them. But please send them to info@projectsrh.com.au. Before I say goodbye, I'd like to remind you that on Wednesday, the 1st of May at 12 noon, Projects RH will be sponsoring its next Facebook Live discussion, which is also 8 p.m. on the 30th of April in Colombia, which is about financial solutions in a time of crisis. We have another special guest, Gary Watkins from Clever Financial Solutions. Again, thank you, Brian, and to you all, good afternoon or good evening.
Pleasure, Paul.
Bye.
Bye.